5 recruits cornered her in the mess hall. 30 seconds later, they learned she was a Navy SEAL. The mess hall buzzed with the clatter of trays, the hum of conversations, and the occasional shout of a drill sergeant. But in one corner, tension was rising. 5 recruits, brimming with arrogance and misguided bravado, had decided to make an example of the new recruit. She was quiet, unassuming at first glance, her uniform tidy, posture straight, but her eyes calm and watchful. The 5 surrounded her, blocking her exit with smirks and whispered taunts. "You don't belong here," the tallest one sneered, leaning close. "Think you can survive basic training? You're just in our way." Her expression didn't change. She didn't flinch. She set down her tray carefully, every movement deliberate, almost measured. Her calm demeanor irritated them further. "You don't know who you're messing with," another growled, stepping closer. The others chuckled, sensing fear where there was none. But this wasn't just another recruit. They didn't know it yet. The mess hall grew quieter, some recruits glancing over in curiosity. The tension between the 6 of them was palpable. Then a subtle shift occurred. She didn't speak, she didn't raise her voice, but the way she moved, a fluid, controlled motion, made the surrounding air feel charged. She picked up her tray, turning slightly, eyes scanning the room with sharp precision. The 5 didn't realize they had just stepped into a dangerous situation. In her gaze, there was a confidence, a calculation, and a stillness that few could maintain under pressure. A subtle breath, a small step back, the kind of movement that only trained soldiers notice, sent a ripple of unease through the group. They still didn't know it, but this wasn't just another recruit. This was someone trained for far more than they could imagine. The room seemed to pause. Time stretched for a moment as the 5 recruits stared at her, trying to gauge her reaction. But she didn't react the way they expected. Instead, she let a faint smirk play at the corner of her lips, a hint, a warning, a silent announcement that she wasn't who they thought she was. And then, as the seconds ticked by, every subtle movement, the way she held herself, the precision in her stance, hinted at something extraordinary. They didn't know it yet, but 30 seconds was all it would take for them to learn the truth. The 5 recruits leaned in, laughing nervously, confident that intimidation would force compliance. But she didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even raise her voice. She simply stood, posture perfect, gaze sharp and calm, as if the chaos around her didn't exist. Then, with a fluid motion almost too fast to notice, she dropped her tray, crossed her arms, and shifted her weight slightly. It was a small gesture, but it radiated authority. The tallest recruit scoffed, stepping closer, thinking he could rattle her. "Seriously, what's your problem?" he demanded, voice shaky now. Her eyes flicked toward him, cool, unwavering, precise. In that instant, something changed, a subtle tightening in her stance, a controlled exhale, a presence that made every instinct in the recruits scream. Something wasn't right. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, but it carried a weight that filled the room. "You really want to test me?" she said. Just 3 words, but the clarity, authority, and confidence behind them made the recruits freeze. Before they could react, her training became evident. Every small movement, the way her hands rested, the controlled calm in her eyes, it was tactical precision. She was scanning the room, assessing threats, calculating distances, and predicting reactions, all in the space of a heartbeat. The whispers started among the recruits around them. "Wait, she's... no way." The 5 recruits suddenly realized their mistake. The smirk on her face vanished, replaced by the steely focus of someone trained for combat, strategy, and discipline far beyond basic training. Their laughter died, their confidence crumbled. "Stop," she said again, sharper this time. It wasn't a request, it was a command. And without thinking, they obeyed. Every subtle cue, every micro-expression told them one terrifying truth. This wasn't just a recruit. This was a Navy SEAL. The room seemed to tilt. The once dominant 5 recruits now shrank under her presence, unsure how to respond. Even the mess hall chatter and the clatter of trays faded into silence. For 30 seconds they had underestimated her, and in that short span, everything changed. Her eyes scanned each of them, calm but lethal. Respect wasn't demanded here, it was earned by skill, precision, and presence, and she had just demonstrated all 3 in less than half a minute.
The 5 recruits stood frozen, uncertainty etched across their faces. Their earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by a creeping sense of panic. The mess hall, once a place of casual routine, now felt like a battlefield, and she was in complete control. She took a single step forward. Her movements were deliberate, fluid, and controlled, each step sending a subtle but undeniable message. She was not to be challenged. The recruits instinctively backed up, tripping over chairs and tables in their haste to put distance between themselves and her. Her eyes scanned the room like a hawk. She noted every detail, the nearest exit, the positions of potential allies or threats, and even the smallest objects that could be used strategically. Every second she assessed and calculated. Every micro-movement signaled her readiness for any situation. "You need to learn something," she said, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. Then, without raising it unnecessarily, she demonstrated a few quick tactical maneuvers, movements trained for efficiency and control. The recruits flinched instinctively, realizing that even a single misstep on their part could have been catastrophic. A table clattered as one of them tried to speak. She stopped him with a simple gesture, a steady hand, palm facing forward, and the room fell silent again. Her presence alone was enough to command attention. The mess hall seemed to shrink around her. The SEAL discipline, the calm under pressure, and the precision in every gesture communicated one fact clearly. Underestimating her had been the gravest mistake of their lives. By now, whispers rippled through the rest of the recruits in the room. Some were watching from afar, eyes wide in disbelief. "Is she a SEAL?" one muttered. Another nodded, shaking their head. "No way, she's SEAL trained." The 5 cornered recruits finally absorbed the truth. Their bravado evaporated, replaced by respect and a deep, instinctive understanding that skill like this couldn't be challenged. She wasn't just a new recruit. They had been up against one of the most elite forces in the military, and they had no chance in a direct confrontation. Her gaze softened slightly, but only enough to signal control without intimidation. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to prove herself with force. Her training, her presence, and the calm authority she radiated had already made her point. The recruits who had mocked her now realized that respect was the only proper response. In less than 30 seconds, she had shifted the balance completely. What had started as a simple act of bullying had ended with a lesson none of them would forget. Never underestimate someone whose skill, discipline, and courage exceed your imagination. The mess hall had returned to a tense stillness. The 5 recruits, once cocky and defiant, now stood in silent awe, their previous arrogance replaced by disbelief and newfound respect. The woman, the Navy SEAL in their midst, stood calmly, her posture unshaken, her eyes scanning each of them with quiet authority. No one dared to challenge her again. The hum of conversation slowly returned to the hall, but every whisper carried a hint of admiration. Other recruits watched from the sidelines, their expressions a mix of curiosity and amazement. In moments, the lesson had spread. This wasn't just a new recruit, they had just witnessed elite skill in action. The SEAL's subtle smirk hinted that she knew the effect she had had. She had proven herself without raising her voice, without unnecessary force. Every movement, every measured glance, every micro-expression had communicated her training, her discipline, and her confidence. She had turned intimidation into respect. One of the 5 recruits, the tallest, finally found his voice, muttering, I didn't know. She's a SEAL." The others nodded silently, ashamed of their earlier behavior. The words hung in the air, a confession of their underestimation. The woman didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned, and in 30 seconds she had earned it from the toughest audience she could face, peers who had doubted her completely. As she gathered her tray and walked away, the mess hall seemed different. The atmosphere had shifted. The recruits who had cornered her now carried a lesson they wouldn't forget. Courage, discipline, and skill can't be faked, and appearances are often deceiving. The new recruits, once mocking and dismissive, now understood the truth. Some warriors are impossible to intimidate, and underestimating them can be the fastest way to learn humility. In the mess hall that day, a legend quietly formed. The Navy SEAL had arrived, and in just 30 seconds, she had turned fear into respect, doubt into acknowledgement, and in doing so, left a mark that would echo in the hall long after she walked away.